Welcome to this session of literary criticism, where we would be looking into the contribution of Virginia Woolf. Before that, we move into the social and cultural background of England. The last decade of the 19th century was a turning point in the literary and social history of England. Industrialization, coupled with scientific advancement, changed the agrarian way of life to an industrial one, and the economy of England underwent drastic changes. The problem of congested cities, rise of slums, fall in standards of morality and crime affected social relations. The rise of scientific spirit and rationalism led to a questioning of conventional social beliefs and subsequently gave rise to skepticism and agnosticism. Writers like George Bernard Shaw, Wells and Galsworthy criticized the breakdown of the social, economic and moral systems in the English society. The collapse of accepted values resulted in increased symptoms of withdrawal of the individual, and the progress into becoming an introvert was quite common. Freud emphasized the power of the unconscious that affects human conduct. Jung and Bergson carried Freud's ideas to their logical conclusion. More emphasis was laid on the assessment of human behavior and the study of the unconscious. Freud's theory of Oedipus complex caused a sensation that was freely exploited by the writers of the 20th century. Intellect was no longer regarded as the means of true and real understanding of the mind's perception, and emphasis was placed on feeling and intuition. The function of the irrational in determining human conduct became the area of exploration. The former authoritarian pattern in family relationships changed with the relative changes in roles of the sexes. Women became more independent, and the notion of male superiority suffered a serious blow. Greater mobility resulting from the introduction of the railway train and the automobile weakened the authority of the old over the young and increased the freedom of the youth. The war of the generations of the old and the young resulted in the reorientation of familial relationships. The novelists of the period revealed a harrowing consciousness of this changing phenomenon of the 20th century life. The First World War further strained family relationships and increased tension, frustration and neurosis among the people. This age can be called an era of revolt against authority. Political and religious skepticism, general disillusionment, cynicism, irony, satire became the order of the day. Neurosis and spiritual gloom pervaded the age. An atmosphere of moral unease, uncertainty, collapse of faith in the accepted patterns of social relationships, and the search for new patterns prevailed. The works of T.S. Eliot and Graham Greene of the 20th century show spiritual reawakening. However, under the impact of science and rationalism, a gradual weakening of religious faith was enumerated. Moral and ethical values were no longer regarded as absolute. Social and internationalism replaced the old Victorian notion of the supremacy of the whites. Imperialism was criticized, and the relations between the nations of the world came to be based on equality and mutual respect. The disintegration of faith and traditional values led to the rise of a socialist pattern in the society. Marxism, with its emphasis on class war, had a large impact on the workers worldwide. Marxism provided many with the vision of a new society that would replace the present one. Marxist socialism had a profound impact on social organization. The aristocracy that had degenerated and made corrupt by the end of the 19th century gave way to democratic ideals and socialism. The age witnessed a phenomenal rise in literacy. Cheap books, magazines, papers were published with matters of social, political and economic interests. The old culture of the people expressed through songs, dance, drama, rustic crafts, folklore had given place to cinema, radio, popular literature, crime or love stories that exploited the people for commercial purposes. Human relationships became coarse and cheap, and man became incapable of refined and subtle emotional responses. Cinema, the television and the cheap novel fostered a kind of daydreaming that adversely weakened man's awareness of social reality. We shall now look into the essay, the art form, the essay in the age of Virginia Woolf. The 20th century witnessed significant changes in the existing systems of all the institutions of thought, business and industry. The modern age witnessed a rapid rise in literacy, and the culture of the people expressed through the media provided an insight into the various changes that were felt by the society. Periodicals, journals, magazines and dailies included essays of interest that dealt with contemporary social, political and economic changes. The important essays of this period are E.V. Lucas, Robert Lind, G.K. Chesterton, Augustin Birrell, A.G. Gardner, Max Beerbohm, Hilaire Belloc and J.B. Priestley. The 20th century essay was quite different from the essays of the predecessors. The personal element was given importance, and the modern essay provided a criticism of life. This point is very important. The essayists overtly expressed their views on various aspects of life through the essay, and the themes chosen as subject matter varied from one essayist to the other. The opinions and ideas of the essayists were presented in the simplest possible manner. However, the writings were lucid and dignified. Frivolous language, ornamentation and verbosity were avoided. E.V. Lucas followed the style of Charles Lamb. His essays were published in The Punch. His most representative and popular collection of essays is entitled The Character and Comedy, which was published in 1907. E.V. Lucas' essays are sympathetic, humorous and charming. His acute power of observation and capacity for discovering the beauty and mystery of everyday life makes his essays spontaneous, concise and compact. The beauty of the common and the familiar is expressed in a lucid manner. G.K. Chesterton is original and ingenious in thought, approach and manner of expression. His essays possess the characteristic quality of being witty, which delight and surprise the reader. He uses alliteration, balance, antithesis and paradox. These features make his essays challenging and at the same time interesting to read. Hilaire Belloc is a scholar and a versatile essayist of the 20th century. His important work is On Something, Nothing, Everything. His chief interest lies in the ability to portray the problems of the society as tenderly, playfully and concretely as possible. His transparent clarity makes the essay simple and brief. He maintains a rhythmic pattern and the sonorous prose that is revealed at particular moments as essay rapidly moves from one tone to the other is quite interesting. A.G. Gardner, a follower of Montaigne and Lamb, is better known to his readers by his pen name Alpha of the Plough. His best collection of essays is entitled The Pillars of Society, Pebbles on the Shore, Lives in the Wind. Gardner's greatness as an essayist lies in the fact that the most insignificant things are articulated to contain knowledge and wisdom. His style is easy and flexible. He changes his prose according to changing moods. He maintains chat, reflects, and becomes enthusiastic and observant of the society around him. His vocabulary is simple and dignified. His essays are picturesque and the images are vivid and refreshing. Robert Lind is light-hearted, humorous, whimsical and amusingly philosophical in his outlook on life. His essays are reflective, retrospective, personal and at times autobiographical. Any subject could be dealt with in a humorous, delightful and thought-provoking manner. There is ease, range and liveliness of conversation, and the language employed is beautiful and dignified. Max Beerbohm gained popularity after the publication of Zuleika Dobson, published in 1911. His use of wit to expose the shortcomings of his contemporaries is noteworthy. Another important group in this period was the Bloomsbury Group. It consisted of a group of literateurs, philosophers, writers and artists who held scholarly discussions at the houses of Clive and Vanessa Bell at the Bloomsbury district of London. The eminent scholars included Virginia Woolf, Leslie Stephen and Thoby, Virginia's father and brother respectively, the novelist E. M. Forster, the biographer Lytton Strachey, the art critic Clive Bell, the painters Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant, the economist John Maynard Keynes, the Fabian writer Leonard Woolf, to name the most influential in the group. Bernard Russell, Aldous Huxley and T.S. Eliot were linked with the group for a brief period, as was the economist Gerald Shove. The group managed to survive the First World War, but by the 1930s it had ceased to exist because the members could not remain isolated with the general intelligentsia in London, Oxford and Cambridge. The Bloomsbury Group did not constitute a school, although they shared some values. The group is noted for a number of talented persons associated with it. This group comprised of agnostics who were influenced by G. E. Moore's Principia Ethica, published in 1903, and by A. N. Whitehead and Bernard Russell's Principia Mathematica, published in 1913. They raised several questions related to the abstract entities on values and the so-called absolute truths. They expressed their irreverence for such qualities that were merely considered to be ornamentation. Let us move on to the major works of Virginia Woolf. Woolf began her literary career by writing articles and essays for literary journals, and after her marriage she contributed liberally to the Hogarth Press, which published the works of eminent writers. The best of her criticism is contained in The Common Reader, Parts 1 and 2, The Death of the Moth, and The Moment. She has also left behind her a number of short stories and novels. Her novels include The Voyage Out, published in 1915, which describes the author's first journey into an unknown world, and like most Indian novels, its plot is uncertain, rather lacks in strength and conviction. Rachel Windress, the central character, is troubled by the mysterious immensity and loneliness of existence. Night and Day, published in 1919, deals with the life of Catherine Hilary in London, who is proud of her ancestry. It is a novel about a proud and introspective woman who has to face conflicting opinions and take decisions on her life. Jacob's Room, published in 1922, discusses the life of Jacob Flanders in a series of psychological aspects or moments of deep spiritual insight. There is little plot or story in the traditional sense, but Virginia Woolf's aim is to make human personalities real by absorbing the reader's interest in the thought processes and anticipation and impressions which the characters make on the minds and memories of those around them. Mrs. Dalloway appeared in 1925, which was followed by To the Lighthouse in 1928. The lives of Mrs. and Mr. Ramsay are described using the stream of consciousness technique. Orlando is another novel that was published in 1948. It is a kind of fantasy biography that is based on the life and literary background of her friend Victoria Sackville West. The Elizabethan period is portrayed in the life of Orlando, who is magically changed into a woman who lives throughout the 18th, 19th and the early 20th centuries. The Waves, published in 1931, explores the 6 principal characters of the novel that embark on the journey from youth to age, revealing their personalities in divergent ways. The 6 characters combine to reveal the basic structure of human personality with its capacity to experience the various facets of life. The Years, published in 1937, deals with the conception of time of the Pargeter family from 1880 onwards, and still that of the overflowing nature of the consciousness and of time as a meeting place of past, present and the future. Between the Acts in 1947 is her last novel. The action is confined to 24 hours in the life of the Oliver family in England and considered the most symbolic of the novels of Virginia Woolf. Having explained all about the novels, or rather giving you a bird's eye view of the novels that she had written, we now move on to explain the stream of consciousness technique. This technique was coined by the psychologist William James in The Principles of Psychology, published in 1890. This technique is used to explore the consciousness of the characters in works of literature. The psychological novel primarily deals with the working of the human mind through the flow of innumerable thoughts that are incoherent. The writer explores the myriad impressions of the human mind. The stream of consciousness technique lacks coherence, a definite plot, rational arguments, logical sequencing of thoughts, and well constructed dialogues. Arthur Schnitzler's Lieutenant Guzzle, published in 1901, is the earliest novel which employs the stream of consciousness technique. James Joyce's Ulysses, published in 1922, delves into the thoughts of Leopold and Molly Bloom and Stephen Dedalus. William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, published in 1929, gives an account of the incidents in the lives of the characters, either memories or experiences, making use of this technique. Virginia Woolf has explored this technique in her works Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. Stream of consciousness probes the thought processes of the characters by thinking aloud the thoughts that come at random. It is usually written in first person. Since the technique is overt in expressing the thoughts of the characters, it is sometimes written in third person. We now move on to her works on social criticism. A Room of One's Own, published in 1929, is one of the papers she delivered on the subject Women and Fiction. She explores the various obstacles society plays in the path of all creative women and manages to protest with a grace and naturalness which prevents the book from regenerating into didacticism. Her argument is the insistence that a writer who is harassed and distracted with hates and grievances cannot produce anything of enduring value. 3 Guineas expounds some of the concerns of A Room of One's Own into a work with a broader social implication. The ugly face of European politics and the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War provided the impetus for the book. The ways in which women might prevent the horror of war is a subject, but in approaching it, Woolf unleashes a fierce polemic against masculine assumptions, values and institutions that makes war inevitable. We shall now look into the essays. The Common Reader first series and The Common Reader second series were published in 1925 and 1932 respectively. The other 4 titled volumes, The Moment, The Death of the Moth, The Captain's Deathbed and Granite and Rainbow, were put together by her husband Leonard Woolf after her death. Woolf's diary, edited by Leonard Woolf, is a treasure house of information regarding her art and technique of writing. Woolf's diary, edited by her husband Leonard Woolf, explains the art and technique of Woolf and her interest in literature. The work elaborates Woolf's literary explorations and her ideas as an essayist. The Common Reader is a collection of essays by Virginia Woolf, published in 2 series, the first in 1925 and the second in 1932. Most of the essays appeared originally in such publications as the Times Literary Supplement, The Nation, Athenaeum, New Statesman, Life and Letters, Dial, Vogue and the Yale Review. The title indicates Woolf's intention and her essays be read by the common reader who enjoys books for personal enjoyment. The title was apparently taken from the lines of Dr. Johnson, who in his Life of Gray mentions, I quote, "I rejoice to conquer with the common reader, for by the common sense of readers, uncorrupted by literary prejudices, after all the refinements of subtle and the dogmatism of learning, must be finally decided to claim to poetical honours." Unquote. Dr. Johnson explicitly states that the reader is a judge of greater literary merit and his judgment should be acknowledged. The average reader uses his common sense and reads for pleasure. His comments are free from prejudice, therefore his judgments are reliable, honest and brief. In the preface to the Common Reader, Woolf claims that she is aware of the shortcomings of the average reader, but she accords the common sense and instincts of the average reader whose response to the works are to be relied. The essays in the Common Reader are marked for their variety of subject matter and its treatment by Woolf. The felicity of expression, brevity of thought, adept organization of material, humane approach to the individuals described, and a unique style of expression of thoughts make the work indispensable to literature. Woolf outlines her literary philosophy in the introductory essay to the first series, The Common Reader, and in the concluding essay to the second series, How Should One Read a Book? The first series includes essays on Geoffrey Chaucer, Michel de Montaigne, Jane Austen, George Eliot and Joseph Conrad, as well as discussions of the Greek language and the modern essay. The second series features essays on John Donne, Daniel Defoe, Dorothy Osborne, Mary Wollstonecraft and Thomas Hardy, among others. We shall now look into the sections in the Common Reader, the first series. They are the Common Reader, the Past Tense and Chaucer, on Not Knowing Greek, the Elizabethan Lumber Room, Notes on an Elizabethan Play, Montaigne, the Duchess of Newcastle, Rambling Round Evelyn, Defoe, Addison, The Lives of the Obscure, which is divided into 2, Taylors and Edgeworths, and Laetitia Pilkington, Jane Austen, Modern Fiction, Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, George Eliot, The Russian Point of View, followed by the outlines. The first one Miss Mitford, the second one Dr. Bentley, the third Lady Dorothy Neville, the fourth Archbishop Thompson, followed by The Patron and the Crocus, The Modern Essay, Joseph Conrad and How It Strikes a Contemporary. These sections in the Common Reader second series are The Strange Elizabethans, Done After 3 Centuries, The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, Robinson Crusoe, Dorothy Osborne's Letters, Swift's Journal to Stella, The Sentimental Journey, Lord Chesterfield's Letters to his son, two Parsons. The first is James Woodford and the second John Skinner, Dr. Burney's Evening Party, Jack Mytton, De Quincey's Autobiography, four figures. The first Cooper and Lady Austen, second Beau Brummel, third Mary Wollstonecraft, fourth Dorothy Wordsworth, followed by William Hazlitt, Geraldine and Jane, Aurora Leigh, The Niece of an Earl, George Gissing, the novels of George Meredith, I Am Christina Rossetti, the novels of Thomas Hardy. How should one read a book? We shall now summarize the chapter. The last decade of the 19th century was crucial to the development of literature because it explored the changes that were fast happening in England. The society was losing faith in religion, and the development of science and technology, coupled with the rise of Marxism, witnessed dramatic political events. Literature, which reflects society, gave expression to the changes in the most effective manner. The essay emerged to be a powerful tool that truly responded to these changes. Virginia Woolf, a member of the Bloomsbury Group, profoundly influenced the literary output of the period because she experimented on techniques that explored the inner recesses of the human mind, as well as writings that influenced various movements for recognition and political equality. The contemporaries of Virginia Woolf include E.V. Lucas, Robert Lind, G.K. Chesterton, Augustin Birrell, A.G. Gardner, Max Beerbohm, Hilaire Belloc and J.B. Priestley. This session will be followed by questions and the answers. You have a couple of questions to be done which would enable you to understand something more about Virginia Woolf. Till we meet next time, bye.